On September 19, 2025, the Supreme Court delivered a decision that will reshape American trade policy for years to come. The justices ruled on the legality of sweeping tariffs from the Trump era, questioning the limits of presidential power. This case was about more than legal technicalities. It was about who controls America's economic destiny, the president or Congress. The court's decision sets a new precedent, clarifying the boundaries between executive and legislative authority in international trade. The impact will ripple through the economy, affecting prices, jobs, and the way the U.S. engages with the world. As industries and consumers adjust, the nation enters a new era of checks and balances in trade policy. Tariffs are taxes on imported goods designed to make foreign products more expensive and protect domestic industries. The Trump administration used tariffs as a central tool, citing unfair trade practices by countries like China. Section 232 of a 1962 law allowed the president to impose tariffs for national security reasons, a power rarely used so broadly before. Critics argued this stretched the definition of national security, targeting even close allies and bypassing Congress. Supporters saw tariffs as a way to revive American manufacturing and counter foreign subsidies. The controversy over presidential authority and the true meaning of national security set the stage for a Supreme Court showdown. The outcome would determine how much power the president has to shape trade policy unilaterally. American businesses hit by tariffs quickly challenged them in court, arguing the president had too much unchecked power under Section 232. They claimed the Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the authority to regulate trade and impose taxes. The government countered that Congress had long delegated such powers, especially in matters of national security. Lower courts issued mixed rulings, creating uncertainty for businesses and policymakers. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, recognizing its far-reaching implications for the balance of power. At stake, whether the president could use national security as a broad justification for economic policy. The justices were tasked with defining the limits of executive authority in a globalized economy. In a landmark case before the Supreme Court, business lawyers passionately argued that the tariffs imposed by the government were not just a minor inconvenience, but were in fact devastating American companies across a wide range of industries. They described how these tariffs were leading to higher costs, lost jobs, and shrinking profits, putting the future of many businesses at risk. The lawyers contended that the administration was misusing the concept of national security as a blanket justification for economic measures. They warned that if any import could be labeled a security threat, Congress's constitutional authority over trade would be rendered meaningless, opening the door to unchecked executive power. On the other side, government officials insisted that the president must have the flexibility to respond quickly to evolving global threats, which are not always military in nature. They argued that, in today's interconnected world, economic vulnerabilities can be exploited by adversaries just as easily as traditional security weaknesses. The Solicitor General emphasized that Congress had intentionally granted the executive branch broad discretion to act in times of emergency, recognizing that threats to national security can take many forms, including economic ones. This, they said, was essential for protecting the nation's interests. The heart of the debate was whether economic policy could truly be justified under the banner of national security, or if this was a dangerous expansion of presidential power that could undermine democratic checks and balances. The justices grappled with the question of how far presidential authority should reach when it comes to imposing tariffs and shaping trade policy. Should the president have sweeping unilateral power, or must Congress retain meaningful oversight to prevent abuse? The court faced a fundamental question. Should the president have the ability to act swiftly and decisively in the name of national security, even if it means bypassing Congress? Or does the Constitution require a more balanced approach? Both sides agreed that the stakes were incredibly high, not just for the economy and American businesses, but for the very structure of government and the principles enshrined in the Constitution. The outcome of this case would not only impact trade policy, but would also redefine the delicate balance between national security and economic reality, setting a precedent for how the United States navigates the complex intersection of law, politics, and global commerce in the years to come. In a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court ruled the president had overreached by using Section 232 to impose broad tariffs. The majority set a stricter standard: only clear, direct threats to national security justify such actions, not vague economic concerns. The court reaffirmed that Congress holds the power to regulate commerce and impose taxes. The ruling narrows the president's ability to act alone, requiring stronger evidence and congressional involvement for future tariffs. Dissenting justices warned this could limit the president's ability to respond to real threats. The decision returns trade policy debates to Congress, demanding more transparency and collaboration. It marks a turning point in how America balances executive power and legislative oversight in economic matters. The Supreme Court's decision will directly affect American consumers and workers. As tariffs are phased out, prices for goods like cars and appliances are expected to stabilize or drop. Workers in protected industries may face new competition, but those in manufacturing and construction could benefit from lower material costs. Businesses that struggled with higher expenses now have a chance to recover and grow. The ruling brings more predictability to trade, making it easier for companies to plan and invest. Domestic producers must adapt to a more open market, focusing on innovation and efficiency. The era of sudden sweeping tariffs by executive order is likely over, replaced by a more stable environment. For most Americans, this means a return to economic certainty and long-term growth. The Supreme Court's ruling sent shockwaves through the nation, igniting a fierce and passionate debate among economists, industry leaders, and legal scholars. The decision quickly became a focal point for discussion on news programs, in boardrooms, and across academic circles, as experts scrambled to interpret its far-reaching implications. Supporters of the ruling hailed it as a major victory for free trade and a reaffirmation of constitutional checks and balances. They argued that the tariffs in question had placed unnecessary burdens on American consumers and businesses, driving up prices and stifling competition. Many business owners and families welcomed the decision, hoping it would lead to lower costs and more choices in the marketplace. On the other hand, critics voiced deep concerns, warning that the ruling could significantly weaken America's ability to protect its vital industries from unfair foreign competition. They pointed to struggling factories and worried workers, arguing that the decision might open the door to a flood of cheap imports, threatening American jobs and manufacturing. Among legal experts, opinions were sharply divided. Some praised the decision for restoring Congress's constitutional authority over trade policy, seeing it as a necessary correction to executive overreach. Others, however, feared that by limiting the president's flexibility, the ruling could hamper the nation's ability to respond swiftly in times of economic crisis or international dispute. The ruling effectively shifts the responsibility for trade policy back to the legislative branch, requiring broader consensus and more open debate. This move is expected to slow down the process, but also to make it more transparent and accountable to the public. The deep divide among experts highlights the ongoing tension between economic pragmatism and adherence to constitutional principles. While some prioritize immediate economic benefits, others emphasize the importance of maintaining the balance of power outlined in the Constitution. As the dust settles, the nation is left grappling with tough questions about how to remain competitive in a rapidly changing global economy. Policymakers, businesses, and workers alike must now adapt to a new landscape where trade decisions will require greater collaboration and foresight. Ultimately, the Supreme Court's decision ensures that future trade battles will be fought not just in the White House, but also in Congress and the courts. The path forward will demand careful negotiation, compromise, and a renewed commitment to both economic growth and constitutional governance. The Supreme Court's landmark decision marks a significant turning point in the way the United States approaches global trade. By signaling a move away from unilateral protectionist trade policies, the court is reshaping the balance of power between the executive and legislative branches. The focus now shifts toward negotiation and collaboration, both at home and abroad. Future presidents will no longer have the same freedom to impose tariffs on their own. Instead, they will need to work closely with Congress to build consensus and secure support for any major trade actions. This means that international cooperation will become essential, and Congress is poised to regain a central role in shaping America's trade strategy. The legislative branch will now be at the heart of decisions that affect the nation's economic relationships. This shift promises not only more debate and discussion, but also greater transparency and accountability. Allies around the world are welcoming the move, seeing it as a return to a more stable and predictable U.S. trade policy. Meanwhile, competitors like China are watching closely, analyzing how these changes might affect their own strategies. The Supreme Court's ruling could help ease diplomatic tensions that have built up over years of trade disputes, and it may also strengthen economic alliances with key partners. At the same time, the decision is reigniting domestic debates over the merits of free trade versus protectionism. As the next election cycle approaches, trade policy is set to become a central issue, with candidates and lawmakers forced to clarify their positions and priorities. The responsibility now falls on Congress to craft trade policies that carefully balance economic growth, national security, and the need to remain competitive in a rapidly changing global marketplace. Business leaders and economists are watching closely, as the new approach could impact everything from manufacturing jobs to stock market performance. The decision challenges both political parties to articulate clear, forward-thinking visions for America's economic future. The era of executive-driven trade wars is coming to an end, and the next chapter in U.S. trade policy will be written through negotiation, compromise, and the democratic process of lawmaking. This Supreme Court decision marks a turning point for America's role in the global economy. It ends an era of economic nationalism and demands a more collaborative, strategic approach to trade. The responsibility now lies with Congress to develop sustainable policies that support workers and businesses. The ruling reaffirms the strength of America's democratic institutions and the importance of checks and balances. The path forward will require compromise, innovation, and open debate. America's economic future will be shaped not by executive orders, but by the collective will of its people and their representatives. This is a call to action for thoughtful, constitutionally sound engagement with the world, one negotiation at a time. At